everyone, for this Underrated Film Saturday, I'm going to be briefly discussing a science fiction film called, as you can see by the title, Sunshine. Now, this story in particular follows events that are probably somewhat within the near future, maybe hundreds of years from now. I'm not sure exactly the time period. I don't even think they give really necessarily a time period within the film. But they do highlight the fact that it is the future because not only is there several amounts of advanced technology within the film, but there's also the sun, which is unfortunately dying. Yes, the sun is basically incapable of producing as much light and as much resources for the Earth as it has been in the past, and this has resulted in astronauts trying to re-brighten the sun, so to speak. In particular, I think they say they put like bombs or something, like some kind of explosive device, so that it would initiate the sun to ultimately go back to its original state. And it is mentioned way in the beginning of the film that one instance in particular they tried this. However, this mission turned out to be unfortunately unsuccessful. And so another mission is sent out, and you see the various characters that go on this very mission. Now, I will point out that although the characters aren't really given that much development, there is still a sense of understanding what they sort of represent, and overall I don't think there is a full-blown context to the characters, but the film does try to focus in on some characters more than others. But regardless, I still think the film structured itself in a way that I think represents a good sci-fi movie. Now, what I really enjoy about this sci-fi film is that the characters are not stupid. That was my huge problem with Prometheus, is that a lot of the characters who were going on such an expedition involving science didn't really know a whole lot of what they were doing. But these characters, they really know what they're doing. They are constantly on the ball. And again, there is some characters that do make mistakes, and sometimes that does result in some consequences. But the majority of the time, the characters know what they're doing, and they're not dumb. And I just kept saying to myself, thank you, sci-fi film, for not making these characters dumbed down. Oh, thank you. And I think that's really what I think a lot of people in particular get behind when it comes to this film, is because the characters represent what we would think scientists would represent as they're going through such a complicated scientific journey as this one. Now, as to whether or not this is really scientifically realistic or holds any implication to how we would actually go about this maybe within the future, I think is way too much speculation to say. But I think it does make for good science fiction, because it does tie in this aspect and this idea of the sun eventually dying, and then having some skill-minded people go out and try to solve the problem. So that's what I enjoyed in particular about the characters, and I think that's really all they're intended to serve. They're not intended to be characters that we ultimately remember, but we do remember their strength and resilience to accomplish such a responsibility. And I think that's really the whole point of the film. And as you'll see too, there's a lot of teamwork aspects involved, and things are tested between the characters, especially when you're in that survival situation. And I think it works for a very entertaining sci-fi film, and I like how the film does take in some twists and turns that you don't really expect it to go into. As to whether or not those circumstances that they present end up being realistic, it's kind of all speculation. But despite that, I still admire this film for trying to be a very kind of gritty science fiction film, which is, I think, a lot of people like about science fiction is the grit and is the ability for team members to sort of work together and accomplish some goal. That's, I think, a huge part of science. So those all those elements were there within the film. And it does present things that make you keep guessing and keep wondering, what exactly ultimately results at the end, but you will eventually see if you decide to watch the film. Now, I think this film I would put in the underrated category because, again, it hasn't been as well known or as well praised. I think part of that has to do with the fact that a lot of the actors are actors that are not they're not A-list actors. Let me say that. They're good actors. They know how to put on a performance, but they're not a marketable, I guess, name. For example, if you got Leonardo DiCaprio in your movie, people know who Leonardo DiCaprio is, and then they'll go see the movie. If you have let's say Meryl Streep in a movie, gonna go see Meryl Streep because she's been so well recognized and everybody knows her. I think what kind of deterred this film in particular, I think, is because of the choices of actors. And it's not because the actors did poorly at all. No, not at all. It's the fact that they don't have a marketable name to them. They haven't been really in the spotlight as much. These actors you'll see in probably more minor roles. And I think that's really the issue with the film, because a lot of people just gravitate towards marketability of a film. They don't gravitate as to whether or not it's actually something worthwhile. And I think that's really unfortunate, but I think this is a real reason, because it doesn't have a big actors or big names. For example, Prometheus, they had Charlize Theron. A lot of people know who Charlize Theron is, but not a lot of people know who these actors are. And some of them did look familiar to me. Like, I remember them, but I don't remember their name. And again, I think that's an issue. When I can't remember an actor's name within the film, especially if it's a main actor, then I think that's a problem, because I think a lot of people go for marketability and for the wow factor of your movie if you happen to have actors in it that are recognizable. Now, another thing that probably I think resulted in this film being underrated is that it's not really it's a hopeful film in certain respects, but it's a very gritty, dark kind of film, and it's not really focused on being good versus evil kind of thing, like how we see with maybe Aliens or with the Terminator films. They're really generated on being sort of a little bit more complex, because, again, we're dealing with the sun here. Like, ultimately, the sun is their main sort of enemy, although you'll see that there's some other issues that come up. But the sun is really the main detour for the people in the film to accomplish their mission. So, really, it's the sun that's an enemy, but in the film they treat the sun as something beautiful, as something grand and spectacular, and that all makes sense, because the sun is really ultimately what they're trying to save, but then at the same time it's also the thing that's really trying to destroy them. So again, it adds a lot more, I think, complexity to it, and I think a lot of people that enjoy sci-fi really do appeal to the kind of good versus evil, mentality. Like, they like the idea of Star Wars. You got, the Sith Lord, and then you have Luke Skywalker. In In the Terminator movies, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger and other Terminators. At least the Terminator 2 movie. In the Alien films, again, you got the aliens, and same with Predator, you got the predators against the humans. So there's really a lot within sci-fi that I think is really generated to being good versus evil survival mode kinds of films. And this film treats the sun as sort of the enemy, but at the same time it's beautiful and it's so wondrous and so filled with so much spectacle, and you kind of see how some of the characters perceive things differently. Like one character is ultimately afraid and intimidated by the sun, and then the other person says, well, I think what we'll ultimately accomplish will lead to something beautiful, sort of looking at the end result. And again, it's just different ways in which people perceive the sun, and I think that's what makes this film actually rather unique compared to a lot of other sci-fi films. Now, again, I think most of it though is the fact that the actors are not really well known. We don't really know who a lot of these people are, so I think that's really what deters a film. If you don't have an A-list actor, then it's really hard for a film to get itself off of the ground, unless it has a big director too behind it. If it's Spielberg, everybody will go see Spielberg. But the director is someone I'm really not familiar with. So again, I think it's just the fact that there's a lot of unfamiliarity when it comes to the film, and I don't know if the director has gone on to make some other films that maybe have been more well recognized. But I think it's just the ambiguity within the film that deters it from people not being able to grasp onto something. So I think that's ultimately the reason why it's become underrated. But I think overall the quality of the film is very good, and I think that it stands on par with some other sci-fi films. It's just different in how it approaches itself. And it'll just depend, too, if you like certain things that they added in within the film to create more trauma and more struggles to overcome. But I think overall it's still worth recommending. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But I think that's really all I can say. I'm going to try to do Sunday's video, too, because I don't know if I'm going to be gone. So I will try to do that for you after this one. So take care, and I will see you all later.